Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the mystery of the body, 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 gathered here in the struggle and the body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Spirit, draw near. Spirit, draw near.
This morning we begin with a call to land liberation. Amiskatri-Waskahikan, the Cree name for Edmonton, meaning Beaver Hills, is Treaty 6 territory. It is the traditional home of diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others. Land acknowledgements are a beginning, a way to respectfully draw attention to the journey of reconciliation in this place and within ourselves. But to simply acknowledge the original peoples of this territory is not enough to bring about reconciliation and decolonization. There is still more work to do. We need to get personal and ask ourselves, how did my lineage arrive in this place? How have my family and I benefited from the gifts this land has to offer at the expense of those who have loved and known it since time immemorial? And what can I do with my agency, my unique gifts, and my access to various forms of power to be in better relationship to the land and its original people? Every day is a practice. We must try and try again in a way that is personal to each of us.
My current home and workplace are located on Treaty 6 territory. As an immigrant to Canada and a former resident of lands occupied by the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Pueblo, Shoshone, and Ute tribes and nations, I gratefully acknowledge the rich histories, languages, and cultures of those who occupied these lands spanning North America long before I and other immigrants arrived. I recently became acquainted with the Indigenous practice of the Thanksgiving Address, a series of 20 greetings that give thanks to all aspects of life. Silently in my heart and mind, I repeat these greetings and expressions of gratitude for myself and for all of us here today.
I give thanks, as an Anishinaabe elder taught me, for the waters of this world, for the first peoples who are the Tree Nation, for the four-legged and the two-legged nations, for the peoples that crawl, the peoples that swim, and the peoples that fly in the sky. I give thanks for the teachings of the elders I have been blessed to be in relationship with as I work to uplift the truth of the harm that has been done to the Indigenous peoples of this place, to heal my own relationship with all peoples of this land, and to assist in bringing reconciliation into our communities in all ways I am able. May we journey together in this spirit. I and others in this room are located on Treaty 6 territory in Amiskatri-Waskahikan, colonially known as Edmonton. Please add your land acknowledgements the way you know best in the chat as I complete ours. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries long before our own, and whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to enrich our communities. We uplift the Indigenous nations upon whose land we live, pray, collaborate, and build a sense of community among people of all races and nationalities, for we are all relatives.
Hello, everybody, and welcome all. How wonderful that we're taking this opportunity to be together in our beloved community. Although we are physically separated, we are blessed to have a virtual space and advanced technology to come together. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we join together each week to learn more about what it means to be human and in communion with Earth and all beings. We are not here because we figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We come here to learn about being in relationship, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. We come here to consider ourselves, our place, our privilege, and our purpose. We come here to discover how we can use our power to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder. At the end of this morning's service, there will be time for visiting in breakout rooms for our virtual coffee hour. We invite you to stay and reconnect with old friends and to make new connections. My name is Lisa Stein, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm your service leader together with Ilara Stefaniuk-Gaudet. And this morning's service was hatched from a study group that Ilara and I have been participating in for the past year at Temple Beth, which is a Reformed Jewish renewal synagogue located in Edmonton. We have been studying Shmita, which is the Hebrew word for the Shabbat of Shabbats. The Shabbat, or Sabbath in the Jewish tradition, happens every Saturday as the weekly day of rest. The Shmita refers to the 7th year in a 7-year cycle in which the land is left to rest. There are 2 parts of the Shmita year that are recognized and practiced as a test of religious faith. First, a rest of the land from all agricultural activities, and second, the forgiveness of debts owed by the people of the land. For a full year, the community is asked to come together and share natural perennial foods that don't involve any human intervention for the production of the food or the land it grows on. That means crops that fall to the ground, fruits and herbs that grow on their own accord and in the absence of human watch, or products that have been stored up. And secondly, all debts except those of foreigners are to be remitted. The Shmita year in the current cycle began this September 2021. Our study group at Temple Beth explored over the past year what our Shmita practices will look like as a small community within a large city and in a climate with a painfully short growing season. How can we practice Shabbat of the land in the depths of winter? What kinds of food will sustain us? How can we share our resources so that no one goes hungry? And what about vegetarians? How far can we go in the spirit of Shmita when fresh foods are scarce for much of the year? We also asked ourselves what forgiveness of debts looks like for our community. How can we be agents of social justice, community building, and environmental sustainability that properly expresses our values and our intention to allow the land to rest? And finally, what small or larger acts can we perform in the spirit of Shmita that are sustainable for the full year? These are some of the questions we wish to explore more deeply with you today. Throughout our service, Ilara will share with you several prayers that they wrote during a Shmita prayer workshop with Trisha Arlen. At this workshop, participants were taught to write Shmita-specific pieces of the Jewish liturgy. These prayers have been incorporated into congregational services discussing Shmita, including our service today.
Good morning again. I'm Ilara Stefaniuk-Gaudet, and my pronouns are they and them. I am a white settler with the great privilege of being Westwood's Director of Religious Education, as well as our primary tech person. I like to say I'm a lifelong UU from before I knew what UU was, but I've been involved in our community in a myriad of ways since I was 14. This year, I've also thrived on speaking at other congregations across the country, planting seeds of connection in them, and connecting with other religious organizations online, such as Temple Beth Ora. This morning, I'm super excited to be co-facilitating with Lisa and loving that we get to share our experience in Temple Beth Ora with our Westwood community. Our tech support helper this morning is Bill Lee, and our musicians are Rebecca Patterson and Jen McMillan. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Dear God, you who hold all things together in love, help all of us who gather to turn towards the pain of the world, the fires that burn our lives away, the smoke that fills our lungs, the forests losing hope. Bring us to our knees to kiss the earth in her grief and ours, tears mingling with plastic seas. We light our chalices this morning in the spirit of reconciliation with the natural world, of which we are an intrinsic part. Amen, and blessed be.
The lighting of candles of concern and celebration is a cherished tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations. Through the lighting of candles, we hold space for each other without fixing or saving. This time allows us to understand each other's worlds a little better, enabling us to share the joys in our lives and offer comfort to those in need. Even when we are not gathered in person, it helps us to be a true community. I invite you now to share your concern or celebration in the chat or light your own candle in silence. And we light one more candle for all of the joys and concerns that remain unspoken but are present in our hearts. Please join me while on mute in reciting the affirmation. May the light of these candles inspire us to use our power to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to serve the spirit of truth in loving affection and trusting hope. Our congregation is entirely self-governed and financially supported by the voluntary generosity of our members and friends. Donations to Westwood are accepted and appreciated at any time by following the instructions found here and on our webpage. We take this moment to celebrate the programs, events, and activities that we lovingly support. Please join in singing the offertory affirmation with Rebecca while remaining on mute.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From together I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Good morning again, friends. Where Lisa gave you a fantastic introduction of what Shmita is, my intention this morning is to bring us all a bit deeper into those two main aspects of Shmita that she mentioned, land and the forgiveness of debt. We'll be exploring each of these two aspects individually with a centering prayer that Lisa's going to share that I had written at our workshop between the two parts. And then we'll end with a reflection question to discuss in breakout groups. We begin with land. We are in a time of climate crisis and profound disconnect with the land beneath our feet and all around us. During our time together, we had Amelia come and facilitate a climate grief workshop that we all found deeply moving, connected with Roots for Trees Edmonton, and a number of us within our group applied what we were learning to co-lead an Earth Day Shabbat service at Temple Beth. Climate change was one of the big reasons that Rabbi Gila Kane decided to begin a discussion and learning group on the Shemitah year. And that subject matter was also one of the main reasons that I invited Lisa to join us. I felt that as a climate scientist, she would have insights for us that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. And of course, I was right. We gathered almost weekly for a full year, and we covered great depths in that time. Our primary resource for our gatherings was the Shmita sourcebook, which was put together by Hazon, the Jewish Lab for Sustainability. The sourcebook is a wealth of rabbinical wisdom, historical texts, data, reflection questions, and ideas and suggestions for ways to practice Shmita in our contemporary day. Land is a huge aspect of Shmita. Shmita is the Shabbat of the land, the 7th year in a 7-year cycle in which agricultural land is left to rest and renew itself, a year in which spiritually the land is given back to herself and to God. There's a debate among various rabbinical scholars as to whether this collectively happened historically or not. There's evidence to suggest both. But historical or not, Shemitah's systems of letting land unto itself every 7th year are gaining traction in present-day Israel. One quotation from the sourcebook reads, "Every 7 years, an increasing number of farmers defy economic logic and leave their lands fallow for the agricultural sabbatical. In the 1950s and 60s, only about 1,000 dunams, or 250 acres, of land lay fallow. 7 years ago, in 2001, it was about 220,000 dunams. And next year, 3,000 to 3,500 farmers will observe Shemitah, and 400,000 dunams will lie fallow, according to Karen Shavit. This is very exciting, said Rabbi Shmuel Bloom, Executive Vice President of Agudath Israel of America. We're hopeful that with the proper support, close to 40% of arable land in Israel will be resting this year. Over the last few decades, agriculture in Israel has moved from a mom and pop based system in which individual families tilled a plot of land to one made up of large scale operators who work thousands of dunams. On his recent visit in preparation for the coming Shmita, Bloom said he spoke to farmers who gross 1.5 million a year who were willing to shut down operations for Shmita. And that quote comes from Michael Lando from Mitzvah Makers in the Jerusalem Post from July 24th of 2007. This particular excerpt struck me as an astounding example of how an inspired idea can be made manifest when there's a religiously grounded community within a larger cultural and societal context for that idea to take root in. While we agreed within our discussion group that it was unlikely for similar practices to become so impactful on a large scale within the Jewish diaspora, we spent many hours of discussion on coming up with ways Shmita could be practiced on a smaller community scale that would still have positive impacts on our natural world. We drew parallels between letting land rest, land reclamation for nature preservation environmentalism, and reconciliatory land-back movements within Indigenous peoples in Canada. We discussed what could be possible at our scale to actually engage in as practices. Jewish law is an ever-evolving, very dynamic system with many layers of specific ways of being. One of the ways related to Shmita has to do with what is and what is not allowed to be harvested within the Shmita year. This is based around the spiritual reminder that we as humans do not own the land we live on. So if the land is to lie fallow, it is to be fully left alone. We well know that this time of rest is very helpful for soil rejuvenation as well as encouraging biodiversity in an area. As such, foods that are encouraged to be eaten in Shmita year are those that grow wild or perennially, as Lisa had mentioned in the introduction. Alongside Root for Trees Edmonton, we learned a long list of local perennial foods that we could plant in our gardens and are planning to contribute time with the McKinney Park Food Forest, which I highly encourage Googling. There's some very cool stuff, as a way to increase local biodiversity and food sustainability. These were two small ways that we could contribute to our land here in the city. Out of these conversations about land use came deeper dives into how we culturally relate with land. We acknowledge that none of us in the group are living on the land of our ancestors, and how that can play a part in our spiritual lives and how we relate with the land we live on. Land in our colonized culture is seen primarily as a resource, a commodity to be exploited, and that relationship shows in the devastation that's been wrought on our plant and animal kin. Shmita offered us a different framework to have these conversations that felt grounded and hopeful, even when they were steeped in grief. Shmita gave us the awareness that we can choose to change our relationship with land. We don't collectively have to continue down a destructive path. We can choose to instead facilitate healing in the land. There are many ways of being, and we always have a choice.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Dear holy ground and freedom bringer, help our songs to redeem our planet, the leaders to change heart, and our own hearts to be transformed. Teacher of my heart, send me forth to do the work which you've bestowed upon me by giving me life. You who knows the mysteries not yet revealed, look upon life as she is and as she may become in all of her possibilities. Transformative justice bringer, help us all make amends with the lives we've thrown away in the name of progress and infinite gain. All compassionate one, heal the harms that live in our minds and in our bodies, all bodies and all beings. Bring us renewal and peace. Dear beating heart, please forgive the lack of pause between breaths that allow us to slow and see you in all life around us. Forgive the destruction we've brought with all our forgetfulness. O miracle maker and shaper of the universe, reshape our world to be as we pray, in wholeness where we have broken and become divided. Our parent, Rauch ha'olam, see my heart and all its faithfulness and all its fear. Guide of our spirits and breath of the universe, hold still the hands of excess that pick our pockets and commodify the sacred. Amen and blessed be.
In the Mishnah Torah, Jewish scholar Rambam reflects, whenever anyone returns a debt, despite the fact that the sabbatical year has passed, the spirits of our sages are gratified because of him. When returning a loan, the debtor should not tell the creditor, I am giving this to you as a payment of my debt. Instead, he should tell him, this money is mine, and I am giving it to you as a present. If the debtor returned a debt but did not make the above statement, the lender should turn the conversation to the point where the debtor says, this money is mine, and I am giving it to you as a present. If the debtor does not make such statements, the creditor should not accept it from him. One of the biggest themes within the philosophy of Shmita is that of letting go. Letting go of land ownership and agricultural use is one half of the practice, and the other half is the forgiveness of any debts that were unpaid within the previous 6 years. Can you imagine a world where banks forgave debt every 7th year? Or where students who couldn't finish paying their loan debt within 7 years of graduation had it forgiven? What about mortgage debt? How could practices like this on a large scale affect homelessness in our communities? We enjoyed dreaming about big ideas and possibilities, but again, our study group wanted to bring the big ideas to a scale we could work with. Our local project that we arrived at is to create a trust fund within Temple Beth Ora that folks with ability to do so can donate to. Then folks who are in need can borrow from that trust fund, and if they're unable to pay it back, those loans will be forgiven in the next Shemitah year. One last integral piece that I'd really like to speak to ties in with both land and the forgiveness of debt, and it comes from a beautiful discussion our group had one evening on how we see cycles of time. This was one of my very favorite conversations because I've always had challenges with fitting into the dominant ideas and constructs of time. We discussed how trees live in a different timeline, a much slower way of being than we do as humans. And we discussed how, in order to have a Shemitah year at all, we must be holding the full 7 years in our awareness. There must be preparation in the 6 years that are not the Shemitah year in order for Shemitah to be workable. I love this concept of holding a 7-year cycle in conscious awareness because it requires a deep intentionality that we, myself very much included, often look in our fast-paced, instant gratification-based society. It really got me thinking. Even outside of a Shemitah context, if we were to live our lives in awareness of a 7-year cycle, how would we live differently? What new ecological and economic possibilities could arise from such a shift in awareness? All of this leads to an interesting question that Lisa and I landed on in our discussion for putting together this morning's service. In a moment, we're going to break out into small discussion groups to reflect on this question, just as we enjoyed so much with our friends at Temple Beth Ora. It's a question that really arises out of some awareness of the land aspect of Shemitah, the economic aspects, and the awareness of holding time in a bit of a different way. For this question, we're defining Shemitah again, just to put it simply as a reminder, as a year without access to arable land for agriculture and in which all financial debts are forgiven. I'll read the question a few times, so if anybody wants to write it down before we go to breakout rooms, you'll have a moment, and it's going to be on the screen right now too. So our reflection question for you this morning is, what would we have to give in order for each of us that are gathered here in this room to live equitably within a Shmita year. I'll give you a moment with that. What would we have to give in order for each of us that are gathered here in this room to live equitably within a Shmita year? I'm just going to give you a minute, so if anybody wants to write it down, you can. And then I'm going to get us to breakout rooms. And then when we come back from the breakout rooms, we're all invited to share a highlight from your group, either in the chat or out loud. We'll just take a few moments for that. And then we'll move into a medical meditation. There's a Freudian slip. Musical meditation. So for folks in the center room, I'm just assuming that you would rather reflect quietly for a few minutes. So I'm just going to put the slide back up so you can see it.
Okay, so it looks like we're all back. So it's a complicated question and fits well within the definition of Shmita and what we can do, maybe not just as individuals, but also as members of our own communities and within a larger community. So if you want to say a couple of notes that you came up with in your groups, you can write them in the chat or unmute and share the highlights of what your group discussed and answer to the questions. What can we give up, or what would we have to give in order for us that are gathered here to live equitably in a Shmita year?
Oh, Lori, I saw your hand. I'll go first and pass it to you. Okay. I shared in my group that if we had a community practice where we let the land rest and maybe we let ourselves rest every 7 years, that I love the idea that you would have to hold that in your mind or your headspace for the whole 7 years, not just the year that you're off or that the land is off. And I talked about how that would require me to be a lot more forthright, I guess, about what my needs are. And I would have to, be in deeper relationships so that we could plan and share. And I think I've been raised to be quite independent. I moved out when I was quite young. And so I think that it made me think about how Anne was like, if it wouldn't be a very fun year if everybody in your circle was starving. So it would require a deeper relationship. So I appreciate the question. Thanks. Lori, what about you?
Yeah, I appreciate the questions too. And I think the sharing part is a really key thing, as well as what Ilara had mentioned about starting to think more in the long term about perennial planting. We plant a lot of annuals. And so in that 7th year, you'd be hooped. So you have to really plan for the long term. And I think that's a whole new way of looking at the world, is thinking in a 7-year cycle. But I think it's a really great idea. It's very exciting to think about.
Alexis?
I think where our conversation was going, at least in my mind, when we were talking with Lori, it seemed to bring up the idea of an alternative to our traditional, what has become our traditional or Western banking system, which I would like. So if someone could get on that, please.
Any other, Anne?
I was just gripped by that idea that we have to give up the immediacy and the living without thinking or without planning, and how learning about this in the Shmita year is really hard because we're too late. So we'll have apples and herbs and 6 strawberries in the yard, but and now I wish we'd left some squash to see if the seeds would grow, right? So, but that doesn't mean, now we have 7 years till the next time. So yeah, lots of broader thinking than just living in our immediate desires and bubble. And I wanted to lift up that idea that we have a minister's discretionary fund here where people can contribute, and it sits in a pot and people give that money not knowing how I'm going to distribute it, right? The generosity of just putting money in a pot to care for people in need is such a profoundly beautiful thing. And it just kind of paralleled what you were talking about with the bursary, maybe not on the same scale. But.
Can I just add to what we were talking about, just the thing about the banking system? I had just mentioned in our group that I have worked with a few Muslim clients who culturally do not believe in interest. And so they can't take bank mortgages. But in Canada, at least, there's a huge fund that people donate to as they can, that is then lent out to people interest-free and paid back as able. And interest is what kills most people, right? Like it puts people in such jeopardy, and culture just doesn't allow for that to happen. And one set of clients I had put a huge amount of money back into that pot after they had used it once and continue to give. And that's a really great communal way of dealing with money.
I love that you brought that up, Lori, because I think one of the things that being in this study group like really uplifted for me is that some of these questions already have answers, and we just have to look to other systems that already exist to see what some of those possible answers are. And the Shemitah is like one option, but then there's the Muslim way of being with interest free, and there's the gifting society of many of the indigenous cultures. Like there are already many ways of being that have answers to some of these questions for the issues that we've got ourselves stuck in a rut over. And I think that's one of the things that really just gave me a lot of hope being in this group, is seeing some of those other possible answers. We just kind of gotta look outside our own circles sometimes.
We also touched briefly in the study group on the bartering systems of various cultures, which we've lost so much of in our culture, but that can work quite well when everybody has something, a different resource to share. And that's another way to bring community together and make sure that all have what they need to live comfortably and equitably. Thank you for all the ideas. That's a wonderful discussion, and we really appreciate having this time to share.
I'm just going to remute all of us, and then we'll move into our musical meditation time for thoughtfulness.
Hinema tovu manayim shivitahim gam yad. 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 Shivet ahim gam yad, Pene ma tov u'manayim, Shivet ahim gam yad, Shivet ahim gam yad.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Dear God, you who hold all things together in love, be with us and empower us to transform ourselves and the world in all her weeping. Dear universal composter, please take the old parts of life that need to die away and transform them into new birthings. Take away my complacency, my lack of self-care, my fears of intimacy with something greater than myself. Take them away so that I may heal myself and life around me and help bring wellness and renewal to the world. Allow our collective voices that cry out to change the narratives so we can begin to see the harms we have caused and begin to heal together. Amen and blessed be.
Let this be a house of peace, of nature and humanity, of sorrow and elation. Let this be our house, a haven for the healing, an open room for question and our inspiration. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of freedom, guardian of dignity and worth held deep inside us. Let this be our house, a platform for the free voice, where all our sacred differences
We thank you all for joining us this morning, and we invite you to stay for our virtual coffee hour that's going to happen in a couple of moments. First, I want to lift up that our Reverend Ann Barker is back next weekend for her first service since her knees. So we'll all want to be there for that. And then, yeah, thank you for coming. We hope you enjoyed our service this morning. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna stop screen sharing and put us into breakout rooms for coffee hour. So feel free to take a moment to go refill your beverages and then come on back and have a visit with us.